Yolanda the yellow-bellied homing woodpecker. Yolanda grew up in the city. The city was a lonely place for a young woodpecker. With so few trees to peck on, not many woodpeckers lived in the city. Pecking on the hard brick buildings, trying to find little insects to eat hurt her head. Yolanda had to compete with the pigeons and owls and seagulls for whatever food happened to be left lying around. "Oh, how I wish I lived in the country with the forest and trees," said Yolanda. One day, while Yolanda was foraging for leftover seeds with a pack of pigeons, a kindly-looking old man came up to their group. Everyone thought he was going to throw some breadcrumbs or seeds, as kindly people sometimes do, but as soon as he got up to the group, he said, "Excuse me, but can anyone tell me where I can find a talented homing pigeon?" Now all the pigeons had heard of homing pigeons, but it wasn't very common, and none could think of any they actually knew. One of the pigeons asked, "Whatever for?" "Well, of course. Excuse me. My name is Phil, and I work for a wonderful family that just moved out to the country. The father loves to explore and is often miles away from the house. There's no cell phone service where they live, and he wants to be able to use the homing pigeon to send messages home when he's out on his adventures." The country, Yolanda thought? The country? With the forest and the trees and happy birds and bees? "I'm an expert homing bird," said Yolanda. "But you're not even a pigeon," said Phil. "No, I'm better. I'm a homing woodpecker." "A homing woodpecker? I've never heard of it," Phil said. "It's true," said Yolanda, "and I'll show you if you'll give me a chance." The old man hummed and he hawed while he thought it over. He had been all around the city and not found a single homing pigeon. He thought, and then he thought, why not? Better than coming home empty-handed. "Okay," said Phil, "we will have a test, and if you pass the test, you can live in the country with the forest family." So out to the country they drove. As Yolanda looked out the window, at first everything looked familiar, brick building after brick building. But eventually the buildings were fewer and fewer, first replaced with fields and farms, and finally little trees, and then big trees. Phil cracked the window, and suddenly Yolanda could smell the wonderful fresh scent of the forest and the breeze. Eventually Phil turned up a long drive, and they approached a big house at the top of a hill in the woods. They got out of the car and went through the big doors into the house. "Hi, forest family! Meet our new friend Yolanda," said Phil. "Hi, Yolanda!" shouted the boy and girl, but Miss Forrest said, "Phil, why did you come home with a woodpecker?" "Oh, but this is a homing woodpecker," said Phil. "A homing woodpecker?" "Yes, ma'am," said Phil. "Well, we'll see tomorrow. We're going to have a test," said Miss Forrest. It was late, and everyone was tired, so they decided to go to sleep. "Good night, everyone. See you in the morning." Yolanda fell asleep dreaming of playing in the trees. Early in the morning, Mr. Forrest knocked on the door. "Come on, Yolanda. We're going fishing." Fishing? Yolanda had heard of this, but didn't exactly know what it meant. Living in the city, Yolanda had never seen a fish. Out the back of the house and down a short path, they came to a dock and a boat. They boarded the boat and headed out onto the lake. Out, out, out they headed, until the house and the shore and the forest were just tiny specks in the distance. "Okay, Yolanda, time for your test," said Mr. Forrest. "While we're out here, we're going to catch some fish for supper. I need you to fly back home and deliver a note for me asking Miss Forrest how many fish we should catch." Mr. Forrest tied a little note to Yolanda's foot, and then it was time for Yolanda to shine. Up into the sky she soared, but she couldn't see the forest or the house. Yolanda started to worry. What if she failed the test? She'd have to go back to the city. Yolanda took a deep breath, and when she did, she caught a hint of the forest. She breathed in again, and she was sure the scent was coming from the east. Off she flew, and flew, and flew, and for the longest time she saw nothing but the lake. She was getting tired and starting to doubt herself when she finally saw a tiny dot on the horizon. As she got closer, she could make out that it was the house. Yolanda flew like a jet airplane to the house, through an open window, and right to the kitchen. Miss Forrest, Jenny, and Sam were all having breakfast and were startled by the clamber and crash. It took Miss Forrest a second to realize what was going on, but seeing the little bird with the earnest look on her face and noticing the little message band on her leg, she said, "Oh, family, Yolanda, our friend, has a message from Daddy." Miss Forrest untied the note and read the message. "Dear family, gone fishing. Please let me know how many fish we should catch for dinner." Miss Forrest thought, "One for Mr. Forrest, one for me, one for Jenny and Sam to share, and 2 for our dinner guests. 5 fish." She scribbled down on the note, "5 fish, please," and tied the note back to Yolanda's leg. Yolanda flew up into the sky, over the dock, and back out over the lake, eventually finding Mr. Forrest and the boat. She landed and gave Mr. Forrest the message. "5 fish! Okay, we better get busy." So they spent the day fishing and caught their quota before returning home. By the time they returned, Jenny and Sam were out in the yard and raced down to the dock to meet them. "Yay, Daddy! Yay, Yolanda!" Mr. Forrest said, "Well, Yolanda, you passed the test. Welcome to your new home." Yolanda was so happy, she flew up into the trees. For the first time in her life, she could peck at the bark and taste fresh insects and bugs. After filling her belly, she flew back to her new family, no longer lonely and ready for her next homing adventure. The end.